for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. This Friday night thing is starting to become kind of a commonplace. So, like some of you know, I have like Monday night musings, TC and Friends Monday night musings. That's been scheduled, but for some reason, I think there's campaigns happening this year, and so a lot of politician types and people running for office like to sit down and talk. So that's what we're going to do tonight. But before we get going, remember, coffee. Best coffee. Seriously, every single person who has tried the coffee so far, well, except for one person, and they liked it, it just wasn't their favorite, has loved this. In fact, one young lady, her dad bought 2 bags, and she confiscated one of those bags. Property seizure. That'll go in with the conversation tonight, by the way. She took the bag, and she is now rationing it for herself during finals while she's studying. She says if she's in one of those moods where she needs to stay awake and not to lose focus, that's what she drinks. And by the way, it's a medium roast. It's a full body medium roast, so it's really good. And of course, I have my merchandise back here that you can see, the mugs and tumblers and nice stainless, black and stainless shot glasses. These things are actually really cool, by the way. I love these. I have one for myself, and these really nice slate keyboards. I worked all day. The nice little slate coasters. So check those out. You can message me at tcpearson@protonmail.com, or you can send me a message on Twitter at Black Robe Regiment, or on Facebook. I'm currently in Facebook jail, but that ends tomorrow. So anyway, I'm very excited to have another candidate for Hennepin County Sheriff on, and his name is Mark. He's been in the business, in the career field for quite a while. I was looking ahead to his website when he was a young man, and he's doing pretty good for having been in it for over 20 years now. You guys, I'll let you guys be the judge, but I've seen guys that have been in for 10 years look like they've been at it since like 1918, and he's doing all right. So he must have like a good plastic surgeon or something that keeps him going. So, Mark, I'm going to bring you in. Thanks for making time for the crowd tonight. I got a lot of people up in the Hennepin County area that watch me. So, I like all 10 of them. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you know you wanted to be a cop?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the chance to share my story and to communicate with the masses and to speak with you a little bit. That part there, when did I want to, I think it does go back to in college. I just sort of realized that my calling was public service and law enforcement. My father was in the field. I was the son of a trooper, and I followed that path. So 24 years old, became a police officer in Minneapolis.
You know, every single episode of Cops used to start off with that. Well, my dad was a cop, and his dad was a cop, and his dad's dad was a cop. So I knew I wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
And my brother's a cop, by the way. So, and he's been in for over 20 years. And we joke about that a lot, how every episode of Cops, but that's gone by the wayside. So.
Oh, you're right there. I have 3 sons, and none of them will be cops.
Yes, they're breaking the cycle right there. We're just going to get it over with. So you've done your whole career in the Twin Cities area. In fact, all with one agency, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's correct. And
that's weird.
It's certainly odd for these days. Yeah.
So when did you? So you started in, obviously, Minnesota's had the post certification practice in place for quite some time. the mid 80s that post certification came in.
I believe so.
So you would have been in on the beginning end of that.
Right. It's interesting. We have post numbers that started with 1. And so the current guys that were working when they developed this were 1 through 6,000 roughly. And my number is 12,800. So
Yeah. So you were a young man.
we see guys coming in today with 6-digit post numbers much higher, just because since 1995 when I was hired, and the numbers of people that have come through this profession.
What compelled you? I mean, were you living in Hennepin County at the time? Because you're just so people who don't know you, what agency do you work for right now?
Okay, I work for Minneapolis Police Department.
Okay. You guys have been, and quite frankly, over the last 2 years, you guys have been under the gun, so to speak, under a lot of scrutiny for different events. A lot of it related to one particular incident, the George Floyd incident, tragic event. I want to make sure everybody understands we do not paint all of law enforcement with a broad brush and say, well, that whole agency is failing. Look at what they allowed. That's not how we do things. But you guys have taken a lot of heat, and you being in the command structure, I can't imagine haven't felt some of that yourself. But you've been with them since, what'd you say, 1995? When you got your,
Yeah. I'll qualify that last piece. I'm not in the command structure. I'm still a civil servant in the civil service ranks and the manager position. And everybody above me in the rank structure would be the appointed people that work at the discretion of the police chief. So those folks would have been appointed by Chief Rondo or Chief Harteau or Chief Dolan.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Sometimes you're a boss though.
Manager level, yeah. I don't make decisions, and I say that carefully because I think the decisions that were made were poorly executed decisions, and I didn't agree with many of them. I was in the field surrounded by fire and wearing a helmet, getting the rocks and the fireworks thrown at me and trying to keep my officers safe.
Yeah, it took a brick to the head, if I remember reading that correctly.
That's right.
That's a bad night, even with a helmet on.
Yeah.
And in your about section, you set up a command post and really kind of helped save the first precinct, where we saw like the third precinct went gone.
That's correct. We used everything we had to keep the first precinct from falling. We did have constant attempts. Our first precinct is our downtown core, and it is basically serviced by bridge over the rivers or the highways. So we were able to take advantage of that and use bike patrol, deep camera work, and keep the safety for downtown. And in fact, 34 American cities were suffering during this period across the country, and most of them were suffering in their inner core of their city. We were suffering in our neighborhoods. So we did put together a pretty strong package, because we really weren't getting we weren't getting a directive from overall command.
Communication broke down.
Right. A lot of broke down. And frankly, there wasn't an American city that did this right. In defense of the people that made the big mistakes and the decisions that we ended up as a department making, other departments we didn't have an example. Nobody knew what to do.
We're up against the Republican the Republican state convention tonight. I'm like, where are my viewers? Oh, they're all at the convention. Or watching the news pour out from the convention. I'm like, I normally have at least 2 like live people watching live stream, but they're all glued to their social media. So we'll have to rely on replays. You in how do I want to say this? The last 2 years, clearly, there again, having read your about section and read up on you, and having had a phone call with you a couple of months ago, actually might not even been that long ago. It's been so much going on in the world since then. But we had a brief phone call and talked a little bit about this, and there's more to the law enforcement career field for you than I think a lot of people understand about law enforcement. You have taught seminars, you have taught, it sounds like, from what I'm reading, it looks like you've taught across the nation about different types of ways to engage, tactics, and not necessarily. And people hear tactics and they think militaristic, and there's a lot more to police and law enforcement tactics than just this militaristic mindset of going out and quelling the threat. There's a lot more on the front end, and it sounds like you've really made a career out of this because you got your master's early on in, is it criminal justice or criminology?
Yeah, human services with criminal justice emphasis.
Okay.
Back in 05.
So that's a pretty big feat because you did that in the first 10 years of your career.
Right. Yeah, I had little kids at the time too. It was a big challenge, but it did allow me to really expand and spread my wings through the profession. And what I took to was event and crowd management and safety. That extrapolates pretty well into protest, demonstration, and riot mitigation, which is something I've been doing recently over the last 2 years. After Floyd, we realized we didn't have a book to open up, so we had to use a lot of those concepts. Although there is incident command and ICS and IMS management systems, this is evolving just like crime evolves, just like protests and demonstrations and riots evolve, and how police address them is definitely evolving. So yeah, that's true. I'm part of something that comes out of Southern Mississippi University. It's called NCS4, and I've been credentialed by them to teach for Department of Homeland Security and FEMA courses that have been designed to teach other agencies, other police and fire and emergency management professionals to keep crowds safe, and whether it be evacuating a stadium, shelter in place, other concepts or ideas, and best practice comes with that. Best practice around outdoor events is something I've written a best practice manual for, and I brought a lot of best practices to Minneapolis. You've probably seen them. They've spread throughout the metro as well and throughout the state. I think Rochester's now on board. Some of our vehicle intrusion mitigation plans. Those are the things I brought. 2017, I think, was when we first brought those up.
Talk a little bit about that, the vehicle intrusion mitigation, because I can do the same thing. I can use that different jargon about things that I'm familiar with, and people go, "What do you mean by that?" But there are going to be people in the audience who are going to watch this either now or in the replay and go, "Vehicle intrusion mitigation. What in the world is that?" Yep. Break that down for the layman.
Whenever someone gathers a large crowd of people, dense crowds of people, and generally in the public space that is usually used for cars, which is really popular in metros and a lot of communities. They like to repurpose the street for, let's say, a brewery wants to have a party, put some music up. Really popular. I always kind of laugh at this part, that in Minneapolis, anyway, the city was designed so that everybody lives within 6 blocks of a park. And although we don't use those parks for these parties,
yeah, the brewery wants to have a party right out their front door.
Yeah,
not move to a park.
So we support that, of course. Anytime people can get together, definitely post-COVID. As a police officer in Minneapolis, I'm all for it. People need to get together to bond, reconnect. Relationships are the foundation of community. So when they do that density and put density in the street, and a car has access to them, whether intentionally or accidentally, if that vehicle goes into a dense crowd, the pedestrians don't have a chance. And that's what we put vehicle intrusion barricades in front of. So if a car, those cement barricades, and sometimes they're shaped like pyramids. Sometimes they're areas like you see in the highway projects to keep the men and women safe that work on the highways. So that's really, whenever you see density on one side and vehicle activity on the other side, we put those barricades up. A lot of times they're accompanied with a squad car. And the reason for that is a squad car needs to fill that opening and act as an additional barricade that would be crushed if a vehicle hit it. But the squad needs to be able to move back and forth, so an ambulance and a fire truck could get into that event to serve what is about 1 out of 3 events with lots of people. Somebody falls, and they need to C-collar, and they need an ambulance to pick them up, and we need.
Yeah, well, when you bring up like breweries or distilleries, I can't imagine why anybody would ever need any kind of help. People will recognize those military people. You might see them as tank traps or tank blockades. And so I know in Rochester during the attempted Floyd riots in Rochester, Olmsted County and Rochester city government closed down the parking lot at the government center using those very things. I think on the second night, and people are like, well, "That's weird. What's that about?" Well, good way to get into a building when you're upset with something that's going on, or if you try to take advantage of a situation, is ram a heavy vehicle through a front door, because it doesn't matter how many people push against most of those doors, they're not getting through. But boy, a car will get up those steps and through a door real easy. And so people have an idea of what you're talking about, because that's a big deal these days. We get a lot of, we don't mention the virus by name on YouTube anymore, because even mentioning it where you're talking about good ways of mitigating against it, they still flag your videos because they're afraid of the disinformation board is currently active on YouTube, by the way. So even post our pandemic, in large group gatherings have started to become a thing, especially in urban areas, in a way that we haven't seen in quite some time. We went through this big span of time in the United States where people used to get together for block parties all the time. And then we kind of started to, even in urban areas, started to kind of have these cloistered groups where you just kind of did tiny block parties, but you didn't see streets being filled unless it was a small town festival or something like that. But it's now become a thing. And now when you start to add in social justice expression and things like that, these big group gatherings are big. And we saw that down in Charlotte with the event down there. One missed opportunity for protection led to a very tragic event. And not just the fighting and the riots in between the two groups, but just the guy driving through. Had we had some sort of mitigation effort in place there, we might have been able to save a life. You've seen a lot working in an urban environment for your entire career. And like I said, that's odd. It's just weird. A lot of people in their career fields, they get to a point in their career where, like, especially if they're in an urban area, they're like, I'm going to try and find an agency or a sheriff's office somewhere in maybe a more rural area or maybe a more suburban area where I can get away from the hectic rat race of this urban environment. And I know I've seen it with guys coming from Minneapolis, St. Paul area to places like Rochester or to St. Cloud or Mankato, things like that, where they're still they have enough of an exciting career, but they're not dealing with the constant one call after a call after a call after a call. You've done this for your entire life. Has there ever been a moment where you're like, I might want to get out of this urban area?
Good question. I really don't. I've never wanted to work for a different agency. I think what really pulls you in, I would bet that the Rochester, St. Cloud, the Roseville officers would say similar things, in that I don't believe that you fall in love with your city. You really do. You have relationships with people in the city that you find high virtue in serving the victims, and you don't. You can't lose that. I actually, we lived in the city for 8 years, and I married a city girl, and we both love the city. I currently live just a couple blocks outside of the city, and we bike through the city all the time, and we're not afraid of the city of Minneapolis. So yeah, I think it really is an officer in Burnsville turns in, he or she finds the people in the city that they really connect with. They bond with the city. I think the profession, we have more people that would do a full 30 years with one agency, and less bouncing. But I think you're right. In the last few years, definitely post Floyd, we are seeing people bounce around agencies, including coming to Minneapolis and leaving Minneapolis. We're trying to get more people to come to Minneapolis, but recruitment's doing terribly. In fact, it's probably a whole nother show for you, but it's incredible.
Hint, we should talk about that. Let me ask this. I would imagine in your storied career, you've probably been an FTO.
Sure.
Field training officer.
And I remember every one of those recruits. Exactly.
It's a very, it's a profound experience.
Mm-hmm.
having trained people and now being in a supervisory but still civil servant position, are you seeing a difference in recruits from when you first started training people as an FTO to expectations of recruits today, and even a change in their understanding of how to deal with individuals and deal with different crises and whatnot? Because when you got into it, things like critical incident training, CIT, and critical incident teams were unheard of. It, you the old quintessential show up, somebody's acting a little weird, and the answer is we'll take him to throw him in the back of the squad, take him to the hospital because this guy is off his rocker, And now that mentality has shifted, and I think that is what I've, from talking to other people, that has started to become more apparent in a lot of the younger people coming into law enforcement, because a lot of them are coming into it with more of a social work mentality than it used to be. And are you seeing that, or are you still seeing people who have always just had a passion to be in law enforcement and they want to get involved, but they're learning different skills than what you might have been taught when you were going through college and going through training?
I think you're right on the nose with most of that. I will say when I came on, it was we had zero training for people that were suffering from mental health, definitely mental health emergencies, crisis moments, and that did change. The Barbara Schneider Foundation was a big reason for that. We had a terrible incident in which Barbara Schneider was the victim of a police shooting, and the police officers she had a knife. It was a situation in which even in retrospect, the officers they didn't have a choice, and they didn't have training to deal with it in a different way. But that changed a lot, and I know Mark Anderson. I think he's still the executive director of the Barbara Schneider Foundation. We're friends, and they've done some amazing work with the police department, with the city. It usually takes a crisis thing like that to change. I think that was maybe 2000 or 2001, perhaps 1999, roughly. But that Minneapolis was a leader in CIT training, and other agencies came up and studied Minneapolis in the way they trained folks. So going to the root of the question, our personnel, are they different? For sure, they're different coming in. Generationally, these are folks that view life a whole different way than the Gen Xers of my generation. I'm 51,
I know how that feels.
Yeah. So
every morning I know how that feels.
The 25-year-olds do bring a whole different viewpoint. Frankly, some of it's very admirable. You give them a smartphone and a hammock and maybe a partner in life, and they don't need much more. When the Gen Xers, we wanted to remodel our homes, constantly work extra hours, work harder and longer, because we accumulation of wealth, so we could invest in our homes and invest in things. That just doesn't seem apparent in the 20s and 30s that we're picking up as new hires. Maybe they're doing it right. Frankly, I have a lot of respect for them. When I watch their body cam footage, when I'm out working with them and I see them handle calls, they are very professional. I think the body cams are a big part of that, because they essentially talk to their body cams while they're servicing a call. So it is very different, and definitely for mental health. And Minneapolis, I think many other agencies are starting to do this, infusing mental health professionals into the work of law enforcement.
Forensic social workers and whatnot.
And it's working very well. They have police radios. We listen to them. We invite them to our roll calls. Hey, we brewed some extra coffee. Come on out. Let's start the day together.
It's quintessential cop too, right there. Hey, we got extra coffee. Just come on in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's working. I think it should go deeper. We only have 13 or 14 of them. And I asked the other day, I asked him, I said, do you have a plan to hire more of you? This is great. We need you on the weekends. So right now they don't work the weekends. And
if I'm going to run into anybody that's having a mental snap, it's going to be on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, thinking about going back to work on Monday. So I shouldn't make light of it, but that's just how I have that kind of that dry gallows humor. So I've been around enough people in law enforcement. I kind of know how it works. I want to talk a little bit about something that I've had other people bring up. So right now, the Minneapolis area, the Hennepin County area, has a response time, and I know you're aware of this. That's seen as atrocious. Um, and I don't mean that as a critique of every single cop, but when you're overtasked, there's just nothing you can't be at every call for everything all the time. It and people get pretty bent out of shape about it, but there's statistics out there that are showing that response times can be anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes on a priority one call. And for people to understand, a priority one call is not like, oh, hey, my neighbor looks like they might be having an argument, but I'm not sure, but they look like they're upset. Priority one call is like somebody's trying to break into my house and they have a gun or they have a knife or they're threatening to kill me. And you've got officers that are out there on other calls getting a call for that and saying, I'm dealing with this. I can't respond. And people are getting frustrated because how are we safe? So there's this very high expectation upon law enforcement to protect and serve aspect, and you're already overtaxed. Are you seeing that as having a detrimental and negative effect on the psychology and the mental health and emotional health of officers in the Twin City areas right now?
Definitely. And it really ties in back to that relationship piece that officers do hold their relationships with the community in high esteem. That part's rarely shared, but officers do bond with the people that they serve. Not unlike your postman, the guy that constantly drops your mail. If you see him, you nod, but officers get a little closer than that, and they know that they're essential for a lot of these populations. So what it hurts the most for the officers who have those relationships is they can't sort of hold up their end of the bargain. They're unable to get to that emergency, and when they do arrive, there's massive disappointment on the part of the victim or whoever called for their help. And that's it takes a psychological toll, and it hurts people. It hurts the men and women who serve as protectors. That's their job, protectors. And you're right on the response time; it's inexcusable. I wish we could change it. It's all about recruitment. It's all about, you know, police officers need thanks, appreciation, high fives, praise, and accountability that we can all see. They all want that. But it just can't be stated enough that if we don't change the rhetoric and we don't change this reality that, especially in my town where I work, that all police are the same, and they're broad brushing all the police under the same with Derek Chauvin, and they think we're all trying to murder people. It's just those officers are quitting. They're done. Families are. My wife has told me many times, why are you in this profession? Why are you still working there? Why don't you? There's many other jobs. Everybody's looking for employees. Go drive a truck. Go put roofs on people's homes after a storm. There's go sell houses. All kinds of things to do to earn a living.
Well, and something that you said, and I cannot emphasize this enough, that the George Floyd incident, not the post-death situation, but the actual incident, that call, that moment, there were mistakes made. There were absolute mistakes made. But what you said is, even I don't believe that Derek Chauvin went out there that day saying, I'm going to kill somebody. I don't think that was on his mind. Did he screw up? Absolutely. But the after effect of Chauvin doing what he did, and the three attached officers in that situation, was that broad brush application of judgment against every single officer in Minneapolis and every deputy in Hennepin County. Is, you're all a bunch of bastards.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all guilty, and I'm going to see you that way. And we even saw that play out last week with Katie Wright in her interaction with Brooklyn Center, where she just stops in the middle of a busy thoroughfare. Bad decision on her part as far as her placement and where she decided to park, but she's in complete every cop is out to kill somebody mode. And in what I saw in that interaction were two very upset people. a very upset officer and a very upset mother who's grieving, whether or not her son had a criminal history or not. She's grieving, and she's lashing out in whatever way she can. And the officer has no idea who she is, and he's just upset. And I think I go back to the idea of CIT, critical incidents teams, and critical incident training, interpersonal communications, how important it is, especially in this environment today, for officers or deputies to approach every situation under the umbrella of, how do I de-escalate this? And what we're seeing is there are some that are getting it right, and there are some that they just seem to be missing that. And it's got to be incredibly hard for a person in a supervisory position to look at someone and say, hey, you escalated that needlessly. You screwed that up, and you have got to not do that anymore, because you're going to get yourself or somebody else hurt. Where do you think we're going to come in law enforcement, especially in the state of Minnesota, but especially in the Twin Cities area, about looking at somebody and saying, great, you can shoot a gun, you can drive defensively, you can drive, you can do, good pursuit tactics. You're really good at all of this. You're good with use of force. We have no concerns about you being, abusive in your force, but you have no people skills, and you're going to learn this or you're out. Do you think that's coming down for officers in the near future, especially with body cameras being what they are?
I would like to see our evolution head in that direction. I proposed this to training when I was a young officer, 05, 06, 07. I'm like, we need to teach people how to apologize. That for some reason is our weakness. Police officers think that when they say they're sorry, that they're also saying that they're culpable
or weak.
Yep, and that is a major problem. And so I took it upon myself as I became a sergeant and now as a lieutenant. I tell all my shifts, you know what, guys, it will always help if you tell someone when they're giving you a problem, just say you're sorry. Just say, you know what, if it happened the way you said it happened, and this happened, and I'm sorry that I didn't get here in time, whatever it is, I'm really sorry about that. And there's really powerful when a uniformed police officer does get to that point, and I think that starts a relationship, frankly. And really it saves relationships. I think that one of the things I wanted to do post Floyd was I was noticing that we were basically being forced. A divorce was upon us. Our communities were divorcing us if this was a marriage, and we didn't have a choice. We were like that person who didn't have a choice in that situation, and we didn't know what to do with that. And even if that's happening to us, it certainly would have helped if we would have just stood up to anybody who wanted to listen and said, we're sorry. We're really sorry that this happened. Our whole community, the world is changing now because of what happened in our city. And we're sorry that this is happening. That piece right there is the start of interpersonal communication skills that we need to move forward with. Since you mentioned body cams, I have a dream, and I believe this is where our law enforcement is heading, and I certainly wish it would happen in Hennepin County. If I'm sheriff, I will move in this direction. And that is, body cams should be live streamed into an auditorium, put a command level person in there, put a couple of sergeants, couple tactical people, maybe a county attorney, put people in there who can advise police in the moment. The main reason why this would work is because we could have saved George Floyd's life. This would have been immediate. Command would have got on the radio on Memorial Eve 2020, and command would have got on the radio and says, hey, 320, squad 320, we're taking over your call. At this point, King and Lane, push Chauvin in the street, start CPR. That would be immediate. You could intervene as a supervisor, intervene as a manager, and folks who really want to get involved in post analysis of police work, get them involved. There are people definitely in Minneapolis who want to talk about tactics and what we do on day to day after we do it. Get them in there. They can sign a non-disclosure agreement and watch every single live event that's coming. You have a headset, you toggle into each event. Right now, it's Friday night, 8:00 p.m. in Minneapolis. there are probably only 10 live events going right now. It's not a huge city, and it's achievable. And this is the city where it should start.
You could even break it down by precinct too. You could have one in each precinct. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's actually a really interesting idea.
it has to
I'd
be.
like to see you pursue that no matter what happens with the election. And if you get anywhere with it, you let me know. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So let me bring it up from this perspective. So a big thing now are First and Second Amendment audits. We're seeing this all over the place, and people are, and some of them are entertaining as all get out. Some of them are incredibly informative and interesting. Some of them, excuse my terminology, piss me off on two ends. One, the person who's doing the audit is they just are intentionally inflammatory for no reason. And some of them piss me off because the officer or the deputy comes up and they're just completely out of line. And they throw things out there that are like, well, you're acting suspicious. That's a completely subjective. So you just think I'm suspicious. So I'm supposed to just do whatever you say. And so that's happening a lot. It's over and over and over again. It's not just, it's not one or two places. They're like thousands of these channels now showing up on places like YouTube, and they're gaining traction. And of course, they very rarely do you ever see the interactions where the guy's, out in front of a city building or a government building and he's shooting video and the deputy walks up and goes, "Hey, how are you?" And he's like, "I'm good." And it ends well. The deputy's like, "Hey, great. Thanks for exercising your First Amendment rights or your First Amendment liberties," and just walks off. They never put that up. It's always the guy who comes up has no idea what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is all about and gets in the guy's face and like, "Oh, I'm asking for ID because you're doing weird things and it could be criminal." And of course that gets blasted all over. And so people have this mentality of, wow, these guys are really onto something. And I think to some degree in some places it can be the case. They might be onto something where people just don't understand that oath of office that you take, whether you're in the military or in law enforcement, you take that oath of office. Some of them don't understand. Some of them literally don't know the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is just mind-blowing to me. But how do you combat that now in this post-Floyd environment? You're looking at being sheriff of the largest county. Yeah, Hennepin, right? Yeah, Hennepin's the largest, and then it's Ramsey, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're looking at wanting to be sheriff of the largest county in the state of Minnesota, which that's not a small thing. We're not talking like North Dakota. We're talking about a dense metropolitan area, knowing there are going to be people out there, both on the left and on the right, trying to catch deputies in a bad situation where they might lose their temper. What would you implement to get guys and gals, men and women? What's the right way to say that these days? I don't know. Protectors. How do you get these public servants who aren't used to that? They're used to having their own body cam, but they're not used to this person having a body camera or having a cell phone or whatever. And then especially with the courts ruling over the last several years that in public, you have a right to record law enforcement. How do you train them to interact with those people in a way where there isn't an infringement upon people's constitutional liberties, but at the same time maintaining law and order?
It is training. It definitely is training. And in those situations, making sure that you group up your officers in threes and fours, and making sure that usually one of them needs to be a supervisor, and you have heavier reliance on someone who's been on a while, has been through several trainings, and you don't have random employees around. I've been in those situations quite a bit, and at the roll calls, I'm incident commander in many of those situations, and we drill down, hey, no independent action. If you need to communicate directly, you make sure you get your supervisor involved. You're in a group of 3 or 4. There's no need to take the bait, if you will, to inflame the situation, to make you part of the story. We are there to protect these people who, whatever they are saying, it doesn't matter if it's anti-police or if they're screaming because they don't believe that the sky is blue. No reason for you to be involved. And in fact, one of the things we train over and over, I manage the bike team, sort of our civil disturbance squad of bicycle rapid response team, BERT. And they're hyper professional, and when they put up their kind of lines and their fences to help vehicles stay away from the people that are using the streets for marching. Because in Minneapolis, you don't need a permit. So wherever they walk, we just take our cues and move the bike teams. We'll watch the cameras. It looks like they're going west on 4th Street. Let's cover down and get 5th Street blocked off. Make sure that 2nd Avenue is clear so cars can't get anywhere near these people. And that's sort of their role. But occasionally they do get close to the point where someone tries to make them the issue. And it really boils down to experience and training, and I think you're going to see more of those negative situations. Where, of course, they'll continue because there's thousands of police officers in the country, and I'm sure many of them don't know the Constitution or their obligation in these situations to protect the rights of others, to make sure that people have the right to share their views and their speech in a public square and in a public way. So I think it's training and grouping them up. And then if you do have someone step out, you have to get them really quickly.
I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and a little bit of the difference between a lot of the old guard people. Not that they were bad cops, but I mean, there was just a day where you could go in and go, I'm a cop, you're going to do what I say. And people would be like, okay. You know? And with the advent of the internet, which neither one of us would have ever dreamt of when we were born in 1970 or 71, depending on how old you really are, we couldn't have foreseen the advent of something like YouTube, like we're streaming on tonight, or Rumble, or things like that. This new generation is coming up. That's all they've known, was not just the internet. And you and I were there for the early days of the internet, where it was dial up and you had to wait a long time to get on, and then it was just like CompuServe. And you laugh because you remember CompuServe, don't you? And then AOL was the big thing, but now it's just instantaneous, and you can go find anything about everything at any time, and it has made a lot of people armchair lawyers or armchair experts in the law and how to interact with law enforcement. Do you think that's having a positive effect on the newer officers because they're seeing this? They're more attuned to this stuff. They're out there seeing some of the bad actors on both sides. Bad actors in the civil, well, I shouldn't say in the civilian side, because obviously law enforcement is civilian, but bad actors in the private citizens versus the public servants. They're both there, and there's also very good ones. Do you think the younger generation coming in, watching a lot of this stuff, especially if they're interested in being in law enforcement, do you think that's helping to mold them and shape them to avoid some of those mistakes?
I hope so. I think that I'm impressed with their professionalism and their demeanor when they're around the public. And of course, they've evolved personally as people before they come to our profession. I want to say people are generally 90% formed before they even get in a uniform. I think that's one of the misnomers, is that there's this idea that the individual police department has changed, and a certain police department is bad, And of course, I'm a little sensitive to that, because Minneapolis has this reputation right now, based off of some innuendo and anecdotal evidence, but that were different from like St. Paul police officers. We were 90%, 95% formed by the time we came into employment. Our drive, our work ethic, how we approach things. I think the young people that are coming into our profession are definitely that way. And so they've evolved with this technology, and by the time that they're up in their careers, if they stick around, frankly, because they're quitting at alarming rates, I'd say that younger generation, when they're
and the older generation is too.
True.
There's a weird thing. Law enforcement, the joke in law enforcement is the day you start your career, you start your retirement countdown on your smartphone, right? And you could constantly look to see, 4 years, 455 hours and 28 seconds, and I can retire, or whatever the case might be. That's not there anymore, because a lot of the guys that have been in for a long time are like, you know what? Like you said earlier, I'm going to go sell real estate. I'm going to go start a hobby farm. I'm going to take early retirement, or I'm young enough, I can learn a new career.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you kind of have that middle group of people are out there kind of holding the strings on both sides, kind of trying to pull it together. And And I could say things that you can't, but I look at Minneapolis and I go, the rank and file officers are up there like, we want to do our job. You're getting pressure from both the left and the right and the city council, which was absolutely adamant that they were going to basically disband the entire police department in the charter and the start from scratch. That has got to be debilitating for the officers to hear, like, this is how much lack of trust that even our city council has in us, that they want to get rid of all of us. That's got to have a terrible, that can't be good for morale.
All right. And that's why 300 people did quit within, very shortly after they did that. It's a different council in many respects. We actually have, there's quite a few on there that we've bonded with, and that I sort of understand the devastation that the city will be going through over the next possibly 10 years to recover from that. Somebody rented a stage, somebody printed a sign, somebody got a microphone and a lectern, and they all got up on a stage and broad brushed, stereotyped professional men and women for what they do for a living. Pretty disgusting stereotyping.
Drop that number one more time about how many people, when that first move by the city council to redo the charter as it pertained to law enforcement in Minneapolis.
351 have left since then. And
right.
We went from 800,
out of how many?
845 is what we had.
So darn near 50%.
Yeah. And
I mean, obviously short, but just, let's for 45%, 40 to 45% of your department gone.
And I believe it's on a trajectory to go down much further. I don't think we're going to see the hemorrhaging stop anytime soon.
It's just not as bleeding out as fast right now.
We lost 5 last week. If we lose a week, where that's 250 a year, and they surprise us. They came from all over the group, people that were in their early 40s, people that were in their 20s. It's shocking when we see those numbers, and we wonder, are we headed to 300? And can 300 men and women hold this town together for criminal justice and public safety?
And I would say, as an outsider looking in, watching the crime reporting Twitter feed, and there's several of them out there, plus the news, which I try not to tune in too much anymore. You can't. There's no way. Minneapolis is on track to set its murder record again.
And we do track other violent crimes. So robbery, aggravated assault, rapes, and murders are the violent crimes that we track in detail. In the downtown core, which is probably doing better than the neighborhoods. Frankly, I don't watch the neighborhoods as closely because it's not my area. We have, as of last Monday, we had 271 victims of those 4 crimes. And our average for a 3-year average, we just find out where should we be? What are we trying to get to? We'd like to be at 197 or lower. That's our 3-year average. So that's remarkable when we're up that high. I think
you're close to double your 3-year average.
It's climbing fast, and we know that the criminals are having it's a great time to be a criminal in a city with few cops,
with ostensibly 60% of your full complement of officers, which starts to border on dangerous for the entire area. Are you familiar with Tim Christopher from North Minneapolis?
Yeah, chatted with him. I have it on my notes to check in with him again soon.
He's out there begging whoever it is that runs for sheriff. He's begging whoever's running for office, Republican or Democrat, begging you, please come out and walk these streets with me and see. Look, it's bad, but it's not as bad as everybody says it is, but it could get worse. And we want you to, and I'm paraphrasing, I had him on a couple of weeks ago to work through a couple of issues. And I look at a guy like Tim Christopher. I think he's an ally for the sheriff's office of Hennepin County, because he brings credibility in that he's very supportive of law enforcement doing the right thing and being involved. So I'm glad to hear that you have communication with him, because that's a huge asset to anybody who, no matter who ends up in there. I want to shift a little bit now more to I'm going to ask you a couple of things about what's going to make you what about you in particular, Mark, makes you the best candidate for this job? Let's start with that. What makes you the best candidate to be the highest law enforcement officer in the county? What makes you the best candidate for this? I'm not asking you about anybody else, but you. What do you bring to the table? Tangible, objective, of without anything else. What makes you the best law enforcement candidate for this position?
It is experience, drive. I'm an organizational wizard. I understand what's going on. I see the gaps in Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center and the rest of the county. I know where the gaps are. I know where the county can fill them. I think my experience includes Super Bowl 52. I built almost all of the security apparatus around that. That included the operational skill of men and women from local, county, state, federal officials, military officials, working with all those people and understanding how to mesh those skills together, how to take uniformed personnel from a variety of areas and to make sure that everybody understands their role. These are things that I've done throughout my career. Presidential visits. I think we had an unprecedented October 10th of 2019. We had an unprecedented event in Minneapolis with the president and vice president, both of their wives. They came to Target Center. We had 20,000 people outside that had high venom for the people that were attending and the president himself.
That was a very nice way of saying they were angry.
And we had 20,000 revelers that had to get ingress and egress from that facility.
Safely.
Yep. And I was in charge of that event. I put it together, and we had 2 assaults that night. One of them was related to, it was a gun pointing incident right out in front. And then the other one was unlikely related. Usually on a night like that, we'd have 5 assaults downtown. So those sorts of things, I just have, I have skill and ability. And frankly, the biggest thing I bring is leadership. I know enough about civil servants, you likely do as well, I can tell. And that is that if you put a leader in front of civil servants, especially public safety people, and that leader didn't ascend to that position due to their operational acumen, merit, skill, you will get 60% every day from every employee. If you put a leader up there who works 110% every day, rose due to merit, operationally sound, and has leadership qualities, you can pull 110% out of each one of those employees. It's a dramatically different result. And I think the biggest mistake we're making in all of our public institutions, definitely in law enforcement, is we're putting people in these positions they're not ready for, they're not skilled for, they didn't have an operational pathway, they don't have the skills, and frankly, it's not their fault. They're there because of their relationships with other people. They're there to make other people look and feel good. It's the consequences are right in front of us. We saw it in Minneapolis. We definitely had, of the 19 people that were promoted above my rank into these appointed positions, they had no idea what they were going to do during the riots. This is what happens. We're going to learn those lessons again if we put someone in the sheriff's office who doesn't have a skill or rose through their own merit. That's what I bring. I bring leadership, drive, wisdom, and experience.
Yeah, I like to ask this one from time to time. If you had one weakness when it comes to law enforcement, what's your and you can go, I don't have any. I'll be like, I'm all right with that, I guess. If you had one weakness though, what do you think your weakness is when it comes to law enforcement and being a public servant?
Geez, I would say, this sounds self-aggrandizing, so I don't want to say it, but I do trust a lot. I trust people. I believe people are good. I think inherently people are good. And sometimes that's a negative quality when you're in law enforcement. We definitely need to hold criminals accountable, and we need to be victim focused. I've been exposed to thousands of victims of violent crime, and I have sort of a connection to people that have been victimized, and I sometimes that shows itself as naivete, and I shouldn't have a naive streak in me due to my experience, but
it's refreshing, because most people that have been in law enforcement for as long as you have been are like pretty hard. They're like, oh, You're saying hi to me. What do you want?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I appreciate the candor on that, because I do think that it's honest. And most people, when you ask them that question, they'll go like, I don't really think I have one, And so I'm going to ask you a couple of hot button questions, because they're big in the law enforcement world today, as far as what people are talking about. They're, again, on both sides of the spectrum, whether you're talking about people on the left or on the right. What is your view on civil asset forfeiture and how it's used by law enforcement? Do you think it needs to be curtailed more? Do you think it's a great tool? Is it overused? Is it not used rightly? Is it not used enough? Because there are a lot of people out there right now that are really pushing for reform on civil asset forfeiture, because, and I think rightly so, there have been a lot of times now where we're seeing it's just being used punitively, on people who are just literally not committed any crime, but all of a sudden, because they have a large amount of cash, they're now having to fight to get it back, or whatever I'm just use cash as an example. What's your view on, especially looking at wanting to be sheriff of the largest county in state of Minnesota? How do you view civil asset forfeiture?
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like that the police agencies have the decision power there. I think there should be an overarching, uh, almost a nonprofit look with a board of directors, some other entity that looks at what is going on, and do the government employees who are a part of that, are they benefiting in some way? If that's the case, it doesn't meet the smell test. So I'm not a fan of it. It's been curtailed pretty deeply in Minneapolis since the gang strike task force, and I don't think we should. I don't think we should expand it at all. In fact, we should have a different entity that looks at civil asset forfeiture to make sure that it's not being abused.
Hey, wow, that's I don't know if I've ever heard it brought up as like basically having an oversight board. So, yeah, we're going to seize your $5,000, but we're going to hand it over to the oversight board to look at. And if they say no, bad grab, you get it all back. That's an interest. I like that response. Thank you. Seems like you've thought about that one before.
Yeah. There's some negativity that I've watched and experienced, and I think that this would get ahead of that.
Well, I used to live out in Montana, and it's an interesting when you see a guy with a Lamborghini Countach driving down the interstate, and all of a sudden now the local sheriff's office has a Countach sitting in there. That shows you how old I am when I talk about a Lamborghini Countach.
Yeah.
People don't even know what a Lamborghini is anymore. How about the use and the justification for no-knock warrants as sheriff, being the primary warrant holder and server in Hennepin County? I mean, let's just be honest. That's kind of the number one thing of a sheriff, not number one, but one of the big things the sheriff is dealing with warrants, high risk warrants, things like that. When you put out a warrant team, no-knock warrants are big in the news today, and for a lot of different reasons, and some of them right up there in the Twin Cities lately. Should no-knock warrants be few and far between, rare, not at all, or what kind of mix?
For sure, it's very rare. We should, hostage situations. The line should be drawn at property. If property is what we are trying to preserve, evidentiary property, there's no justification for it. If it's life, if it's injury, and that is obvious to the officers, that's where it's applicable. That's where we use the no knock. We can't take them completely off the table because of those situations, and then exigent circumstances that would allow us to even go with warrantless.
Yeah, warrantless. Yeah.
But I think it's all property. When we were worried about losing a large amount of narcotics down the toilet, and that's the reason for the no knock, we're going to have to find a different way to do that. I'm not content at all. I have a 19-year-old. He's door dashing right now. This is what Amir Locke was alleged to have been doing. Right. He's sleeping at a buddy's house. My 19-year-old sleeps at his buddy's house. In fact, weather the other night, he had to. So I saw my kid in Amir Locke, like many of us did, and Although I also will say that the police officers had no choice, and should be no surprise to anybody that lives in this country that if you raise your gun at a police officer, they can and will destroy you. It's super sad that we lost Amir Locke that day. And it's also super sad that the police officers had to go through that the individual officers had nothing to do with the
Bad information.
the no knock situation. That all of what they did was exactly what they've been trained to do, and they did it very well. But systems change, definitely. We should be looking at systems changes, and we have in Minneapolis. I think we were late. We, meaning the city of Minneapolis and our police administration, they were late to that change. There's quite a few of those things that we could be changing. And as the sheriff, I think I would go into it with a pretty good policy already in hand with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, but continue to tweak it. And frankly, stay on top of best practice. As other agencies are doing best practice and evolving, we can't sit back and say, oh, we're the big show in town. We're the biggest in the state. We have to follow the other agencies and stay with best practice. Things like no-knock search warrants, and frankly, all operational tactical work that our employees have to do while they're executing their jobs. Because there's benefits to serving warrants. There's benefits for the people, for our communities to solve murders and gather evidence, and we can't take some of those tools away from our skilled men and women.
Yeah, I like how you say that. It just definitely needs to be looked at how we handle it, and definitely not over property, even if it's a large amount of narcotics. That's an encouraging comment, because there are a lot of people that out there are like, oh well, we got to get the evidence, and I'm like, is the evidence worth a life? Whether it's the officer or the other person on the other end, because at that point you might have preserved the evidence, but now you lost a life over something like preserving evidence. So I really like to hear I liked how you handled that. I'll just ask this outright. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of law enforcement agencies, county sheriffs, local municipalities, and whatnot, put in an incredibly difficult position by either their city councils and their mayors, or by governor's mandates across the country, but here in the state of Minnesota, especially over things like policing mask wearing, policing stay-at-home orders, policing social distance. I mean, I read story after story after story about people calling hotlines to say my neighbor's having a party. And one of the areas where a sheriff is often looked at as this highest constitutional officer in his jurisdiction. And a lot of people look to the sheriff to not necessarily be the Supreme Court, so to speak, but to say, I swore an oath to the Constitution, and I have a duty to the people in my jurisdiction to govern well in that respect, to be that chief law enforcement officer. How do you go about dealing with a wide variety of opinions and about whether or not the governor was within his right, within his duties and his powers to make a lot of decisions about telling people they had to wear a mask, telling people they had to stay home? And how would you, and I hate to say it, like, we don't know, we could be dealing with this again in another year or 6 months or whatever. How would you as sheriff approach that with your men and women, your public servants, your protectors?
And certainly I would take each situation as it comes and look at the merits of it. And the sheriff is a unique position. It's not like a police chief, then that they are sort of beholden to an elected person. The sheriff is the elected person, and they are also hopefully the operational, intelligent, most qualified person in the agency.
Yeah, hopefully, right?
So I would take those. I would take the governor's advice under advisement, but I wouldn't use my men and women that are employed by the sheriff's office to execute the checking in on people for following the rules around COVID and public health. The governor or whoever makes these decisions would have to figure out a way to implement whatever mandate that they're hoping for from the public. The sheriff's office, there's nothing in the sheriff's credence that it would make the sheriff have to be subservient to a governor. That's just not, that's not how it works. The sheriff is in his or her own right elected to that position and expected to serve the people, the voters, directly, which is one of the reasons I crave the position. Is I really would like to be accountable directly to the voters. I think that is how law enforcement leaders should be chosen.
Well, I think that's a fair position on ultimately, and I'm just going to throw it out there because right now, obviously, the current sitting sheriff, who's now said he obviously, I think for a wide variety of reasons, but we'll just go back to December, kind of uh, shot himself in the foot with the idea of being able to run again, especially when a lot of people were demanding his immediate resignation. Um, and what it speaks to is kind of what you were saying is who is he accountable to? And I have a hard time with somebody in that position who is an oath taker, who is there to uphold the Constitution and whatnot, uh, finding themselves, bad decision or not, in a position where like, no, 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 I'm okay. I'm going to go ahead and keep doing what I'm doing, but I won't run again. And I think that brings a lot of suspicion out there again, not just from one particular side of the political spectrum. You get a lot of scrutiny from both sides. That says like, wow, what, like, okay, if I did that, I wouldn't be able to say I just won't like apply for the job again, but I'm going to finish out my term. That's got to be something that's got to be on your mind and the mind of Jai and all the other candidates. Like, I'm walking into a mess where not only do people already have a low view in some respects, not all of them, but some have a low view of law enforcement, but there's even kind of a lack of respect for the office. If I win, I've got to really bridge that gap between where people are now and try to rebuild that damage that's been done. If you win, how are you going to do that? How are you going to rebuild that damage to public trust?
I like that question a lot. I think that the number one obligation that I find when I'm in the office January of next year will be to untangle that department and take the chaos and put it away, get the politics out of the department, let the men and women breathe a little bit, make sure that they know that they have the trust of their leader, that their wellness, their work environment and their content in their own position is there so that they can go out and serve in the way that they know how to. And then from there, move as a team. I'd say April, May, June of 2023, move as a team to ensure public safety, to minimize crime, to do all of the things that we need to do to be good partners to our municipalities throughout the county. All of those those are the goals, right? To connect with young people, to try to help address mental illness and emergency mental health problems without using uniform protectors. Back up the mental health professionals. Those are the goals. So I think over time relationships will get stronger. The trust will be brought back into the agency and the sheriff's office. Without commenting specifically on what happened to the current sitting sheriff, it'll be a roller coaster. It'll come back, and our job is to maintain the public's trust. And frankly, if we fail in that regard, we will say we failed and we don't deserve a second term. We will. I think that's one of the big things I like to do when I put any project together, anything. I define failure. I define success. If I don't achieve and I fail, I'm the first one to point that out. Very few other government initiatives do that. The rubric for which you can assess my work is given to you the moment that I propose something. I think it's evident with in Minneapolis, we have an Office of Violence Prevention. The fact that we're not preventing violence at all and that it's going up is an obvious indicator that office is failing.
Well, you know what the problem is you're just not spending enough money on it. That's what you have
Right.
to. You need to spend more money on the office, and then it can be successful. Uh, I really I appreciate how you brought up the phrase or the term rubric, because I think that's a foundational aspect of there's this defined parameter of what is success and what isn't. And I think a lot of times any elected servant, and if you pay any, if you ever after today pay any attention to any of my content, I always refer to people in these positions not as as authorities or officers or whatnot, or even by their title, but by as public servant, because I think that's something we have to get back to. But a lot of times public servants don't understand that the rubric for whether or not they're executing their duties is the public view of them in light of how well they're doing their job. And I think that's been very evident in places like the Twin Cities, is there is that disconnect. And I look, so let's go back to the incident following George Floyd, and you're now sheriff, and we have, God forbid that anything else like this ever happen again in the Twin Cities, in the state of Minnesota. You're watching a breakdown of communications. You're watching a city burn outside of the precinct that you were manning. So, and thank God that you were able to muster a defense of that entire neighborhood, not just the building, but that entire community in that sub community there. But you're the sheriff and you're watching this. Where does the sheriff at some point step in and say, okay, Minneapolis Police Department, Minneapolis City Council, Minneapolis Mayor, Governor, you're failing. I'm stepping in. I'm going to do. Is that a role for the sheriff? And should the sheriff be looking at that and saying, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't sit back. I have to get involved.
It's not the role for anybody sitting in the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. It is the role for me, because I know all of those people. They know me. They know my skill set. So I will have no trouble being given the reins. These folks will be happy to give me the reins. That's one of the big problems. And what happened in 2020, nobody wanted the reins. Nobody came in and had the skill sets to do that. I'm not, not a state official, not a commissioner, not a sheriff, not a different police chief.
There was a lot of hands off. Like, it's not my job.
It was, nobody wanted the reins, and it was shameful. And frankly, the first 2 nights I was in the 3rd precinct, I was trying to help them. We brought our whole team down there because we knew they needed our help, and we saw that we weren't getting a directive. We were just on the street trying to build strike teams, went out in the communities, realized that looting was unbelievable and that this was falling down. When we learned what was going to happen the next day, that's when we circled the wagons on our own precinct to say, well, I guess we can't help them anymore. The decision's been made on that, and we're going to keep our own precinct from falling. And of course, it was attacked. 5th precinct was targeted, and 1st precinct was right after that. Luckily, 5th precinct was about as close as they could get to falling, and did a remarkable job. The after action on that is incredible. And
I would love to read that report.
Yeah, sadly, those after actions were few and far between, and they weren't.
Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you stand? A big question in the state of Minnesota right now are things like constitutional carry, the idea of permitless open carry versus permitted concealed carry, sanctuary cities, and we hear this language when you get to maybe more of the West Coast or the East Coast, sanctuary cities for undocumented immigrants. But you also are starting to hear a lot more talk about sanctuary cities when it comes to Second Amendment liberties. And several years ago, the Minnesota legislature changed the language for the permit to carry process in the state of Minnesota from may issue, which left the discretion up to the sheriff, not based on anything other than how you personally felt about the individual, and turned it to shall issue. In other words, you had to have a compelling much like articulable suspicion to detain somebody. You had to have a very clear, articulable, objective reason for not issuing a permit to a person, like clearly has mental health issues, documented mental health issues, or a documented criminal record, felonious criminal record, or a domestic abuse type criminal record, to that shall issue. Do you see citizens who are trained and carrying firearms as a boon or a bane to law enforcement in Hennepin County?
I guess I wouldn't say either, but I have no problem with people carrying a weapon if they have the permit to carry. I, I I believe that people want to carry a weapon. It makes them feel better about their own safety, the safety of those around them. That's the law, and that's my feeling on it. That people should carry if they're complying with the law. Well, what we see often is people without permits to carry in complete violation shooting at each other. We arrest them, and then they go through the system with no repercussions, and they're back out. So it's alarming, frankly. And
It's almost like, why even have a system in place at that point?
so if we're going to curtail the right to carry with a permit and folks that follow all the rules, I mean, and somehow give them sanctions if they were to carry weapons without a permit, then I guess we better start working on the people who literally shoot bullets at or into other individuals. We should be working on keeping those violent folks away from everyone else.
I just had that conversation with a coworker today. We were talking about the idea of a permit to carry and just how terrifying the idea is that you can have a permit and be in a situation where you legitimately need to use it, and you may not even have to like pull the trigger, but just drawing your weapon, and you could find yourself in a massive legal struggle for years over just pulling a weapon when you have a permit. Whereas you go, like you said, literally in the Twin Cities right now, a guy could draw a weapon, have it carrying it illegally, oftentimes is already a felon. Slap him into the Hennepin County Detention Center. He shows up in front of the judge the next day, and the judge puts him out, sometimes without even a bond.
Mm-hmm.
So, lesson learned. So you wouldn't be in a position to argue for even more restrictions on who can carry, as long as they're meeting the demands and the requirements of the current law as it is.
Correct. I would fulfill the obligation of sheriff is to issue those permits in a shall fashion, unless something shocked the conscience to the point where the person obviously has an inability to carry a weapon safely.
Right now, one of the complaints I'm hearing, so I live in Fillmore County, and I don't know if you're familiar, but we're way down here in the southeast corner, and I hear people talking about, like, it runs all the way up to that 30-day line in the sand where they have to issue it to you, or there's trouble if they don't. But I'm hearing this over and over and over again, that a lot of counties are seeing such a high demand and high application rate that they're having a hard time meeting the background checks and the issuing of the permit and having it to people in that 30 business day window. What would you think would be a solution to that problem for a sheriff in a community the size of Hennepin County? Is it just putting another administrative deputy on that, or is there another? Do you think there's another way around to expedite that, so you're not getting people who are like, okay, I can't do it. I can't live in this neighborhood anymore without some sort of protection, and I don't want to break the law. I want to be law abiding, but I can't wait 30 days because I feel like I'm going to get gunned down walking to my car. Because that's what you're hearing. That's what I'm hearing from people right now, is like, I want to get a gun to protect myself. I don't even feel safe taking my trash out anymore, but I got to wait for so long. What can a community the size of Hennepin County do with a sheriff's office to expedite that process?
We did see lines, and I'm familiar with Fillmore County. I was born in Freeborn.
Nice.
But we saw lines around the city hall, around where the sheriff's office is, for weeks after maybe July to August 2020, because we did have that sentiment among the population. And I'm not sure what the sheriff did in the sheriff's office, but I didn't hear the complaints. And after a while, the lines went down. I'm not sure what the waiting time is, but I would love to hold that to a 30-day wait time. I think Hutch put this together, where he has a secondary service window out in where the water patrol offices, out by Lake Minnetonka, so people in the far west edge of the county have a place to go to as well, and that seems to have served its purpose. So creative ideas like that use our patrol bureau offices in Plymouth to have another site. Try to get people that they don't all have to come to one site. Figure strategies around to make sure that everyone can get the permit, and we're following the rules.
Yeah, it's a difficult. I know it's a difficult question because how do you manage the logistics of that? So we've been on for hour and 20 minutes, and I'm sure you probably had a busy week. So, what would you say to the people who in Hennepin County, and quite honestly, the people are now more than ever paying very close attention to pretty much every sheriff's race in their state, trying to see who's taking the reins. What would you say to the people who are going to consider, because I think there's 485 people have all put their name in their name in the hat for sheriff, and it seems like every time I click on the news out of Hennepin County, like, oh, another person's running for sheriff, and I'm like, who is this guy? What, or who is this gal? What would you say to the people out there who are trying to decide between you and all of the other candidates? Like, and you've already shared what made you, the better candidate in your mind than anybody else, but you're talking to the guy at the cafe downtown Minneapolis, or talking to the guy in the cafe in North Minneapolis who's, well, why should I vote for you? What's Hennepin County Sheriff's Office going to do for me? Because I can't walk. I have to come down here at 9:00 in the morning, hoping I don't even get mugged then. How can you help me? Why should I vote for you, Mark?
I would say first, make sure that you educate yourself on all of the candidates. Make sure that you're an educated voter. Some of these down ballot elections like mine sometimes have the largest number of people who are voting whimsically, and that's destructive. So I would say definitely in this year, public safety crisis that we're in, crime and criminal justice are huge issues that we need everybody to participate in. We need everybody. We don't need just left side, just right side. We need everyone. The reason why I want you to vote for me is because I don't play party politics. As the sheriff's office is designed, you're not a Democrat, you're not a Republican. You're bipartisan, you're nonpartisan, you're everybody's sheriff. And criminals don't care what side of the aisle you come from when they take your car at gunpoint. So I understand that. I believe that the furthest right, the furthest left belong at the solution table. I will craft a group of people who come from the populations that we serve the most. Frankly, it's the age group 18 to 28 years old. We need those people at the table finding solutions for us, because those are the ones that fill up the jails. Those are the ones that go to the criminal justice system. Those people generally are the ones that hurt other people in large numbers. That age group needs to be helping figure out what we can do to craft a better community, a better neighborhood for all of us to live in. Because I don't think anyone argues with the fact that safety is number one among the priorities of government, and that's something I bring is definitely the philosophy that I will work with everyone. I will create relationships. Doesn't matter if you voted for me or supported me, if you're an employee of an organization that my organization or otherwise, we're all going to have to get together and work on this problem. And I would ask people to make sure they vote in the primary. The primary is August 9th, and it's a big deal this year because you have to whittle down in the sheriff's race. You're whittling down to 2 people, regardless of party politics, and those 2 people are going to be the ones you choose in November. So in November, be involved. That's what I would say, and please vote for me because I believe I'm the best candidate. My only struggle is I have 540,000 voters to get to, and that's difficult.
Well, we'll see if we can get you out to at least 10 of them with this show.
Thank you.
With my tens and tens of viewers. No, I really appreciate your time, Mark. And for those people who are trying to figure out how to say your last name without butchering it, how do you say your last name without butchering it?
Either way is fine. Klukow is how almost everyone in my family would want to say it, and Klukow I'll respond to as well. Klukow, either one.
And what is the nation of origin for that?
It's Prussia. It's Eastern Bloc.
I was going to say that sounds like an ancient, or not ancient, but old Prussian name.
Yes, you're right on. Klukow.com is my website too, which is,
Yep. I
yeah,
put it up there for you.
appreciate that.
So, well, I really appreciate your time coming on, and I will do a close, and you can go. I caught you doing, you know,
Oh,
because I.
it was a fun week, but I don't want to complain. It was a fun week. It got to meet a lot of interesting people. So
Well, it was a good week to be active. So you go get some rest, and are you a Twins fan?
certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about baseball, but I've been listening to the uproar over this pitcher who they keep talking about being so good but not playing at all. So I listen to GL once in a while, and the guys on GL, Souchere and Royce and whatnot, they have a very they have they have spirited conversations about the Twins on a regular basis because, like most Minnesota sports teams, they're really good about building you up and letting you down.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you can go ahead and get out of here, and I will close up without you. Thank you for your time, and thank you to your family for allowing you to step away to do this. And I appreciate you coordinating this with me.
Right back at you. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Best of luck. You take care.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we were fortunate to be able to get this time with Mark, and I this is what I want people to do. Like, this channel is about so many things. One of it is about government overreach. It's about public servants who are doing well and public servants who aren't doing well. We highlight both. We want to be a channel that is not neutral, but is guarded in how it approaches things. And with anything, we have a tendency, I think, as human beings, all of us, to go to one extreme or to the other. And I don't want to have that pendulum shift where I'm just always just everything's a catastrophe or a nightmare, but I also want to be real. And Hennepin County is definitely facing a fight right now. Crime is, as you heard from Mark, you heard from Jai when he was on, crime is skyrocketing in Hennepin County. We're coming down to a point where the sheriff of Hennepin County is going to have to start making some hard decisions if the Minneapolis City Council and the mayor and the police chief and whatnot aren't going to be able to do anything to curtail crime in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis. Hennepin County is going to have to do something to step in because the governor's certainly not doing anything. And so be informed. Mark has said that. Jai has said that. You need to be informed. And don't just vote for a person because they happen to tick all the magical boxes about society today. We affirm this, or we affirm that, or we're an ally about this, or we're an ally to that. Don't tick boxes. Instead, what you need to do is ask hard questions, listen to their answers, and then make informed decisions. Informed consent. We talk about that so much with things like the jab and other stuff. Well, you need to have informed consent or informed decisions when you decide who to vote for. So check out Mark's website. You saw it out there, klukow.com. If you need to know. And if there's another candidate you think, especially for Hennepin County or for any other office here in the state of Minnesota, that I should have on, send them my way. I do want to announce that my Subscribe Star is official. It is up and running. I have several tiers. I'm going to be adding on other tiers to my Subscribe Star. There is going to be exclusive content for all of my subscribers, and there's going to be exclusive content for certain tiers. And I'm working out what that's going to look like. And as always, if you're interested, check me out for coffee or any of my merchandise. But especially if you like my content, if you like what I've been doing for the last 2 years and you want to see it go, please support me. Check me out on Subscribe Star. It's actually, if you're not the person who drinks coffee or you're not the kind of person who uses merch, Subscribe Star is a really good way to do it. I have a tier that starts at $3, and I have a $5 tier, a $25 tier, and a $50 tier. And if you're the person who goes, hey, I'd like to be a part of that $3 tier, every single tier counts. Every single tier helps, because I'm in a bind. I like to do this show, and it takes money to do it. And I never thought I'd be in a place where I would say that. But I appreciate those who watch and share, and I appreciate anybody who even considers being part of the Subscribe Star. So check it out. Tomorrow will be another episode of Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Saturday Sit Rep. I'm going to be having Larvina McFarquhar on. She is from the owner and operator of Haven's Garden, and she's had her own legal battles over governor's mandates over the last 2 years. And we're going to be doing an update about the ruling that she had come down the pike this week. And we're going to talk to a little bit to her about where she's been for the last 2 years, how she's doing emotionally, mentally, spiritually, politically, psychologically, and I'll do some of my normal commentary. We've got a lot of good news items to talk about for this week, and I am going to be heading out early tomorrow morning, drive the 30 miles to the Rochester area, and I'm going to be trying to get some man on the street interviews at the convention and see if I can track down the abortion-loving protesters who are supposed to show up and cause mayhem at the convention tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can get some footage of that. So please tune in tomorrow for Saturday Sit Rep for my conversation with Larvita, and then be looking for the man on street interviews, because I know I'm going to get at least 2 or 3 people who are going to want to talk to me. They won't know who I am, but they'll want to talk. So I don't get that a lot. I don't, hey, I know you. You have a show. It doesn't happen to me very often, but we'll see if we can change that, right? Once again, message me if you want merchandise, and I will get it to you ASAP when you order. So until next time, my friends and fans, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at